The massive screen in the Galactic Council chamber showed the same thing it had for the past 300 years. A shimmering blue wall of energy that stretched across an entire solar system. Captain Hand stood quietly, his hands behind his back, watching as yet another alien ship tried to breach the barrier. The ship's advanced weapons hit the force field and faded away like raindrops on a window. That was last week's attempt, Admiral Kim said, pointing at the screen. The Rigelians thought their new quantum torpedoes would work. They failed, just like everyone else. The Admiral's voice carried a hint of amusement. He turned to face the small group of officers gathered in the briefing room of the Korean Space Force headquarters. Captain Han nodded, his eyes still fixed on the screen. He had seen many such recordings over the years, but this was different. This time, he would be leading the mission to study the barrier himself. His ship, the KSS Sejong, waited in orbit, ready for its most important mission yet. "Sir, how many species have tried to get through?" asked Lieutenant Sun from her seat in the front row. Her question made several other officers lean forward with interest. Admiral Kim pressed a button on his desk. A list appeared on the screen, replacing the image of the barrier. 57 advanced civilizations have attempted to breach it. All of them failed. He paused, letting that sink in. The Terre people behind that barrier haven't communicated with anyone in 3 centuries. Dr. Yun raised her hand. She was the ship's lead scientist, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity. What about the barrier's power source? Surely it must need massive amounts of energy to maintain itself. That's one of the mysteries we want you to solve, Admiral Kim replied. He walked to the window, looking out at the gleaming towers of New Seoul. The barrier never weakens. It never flickers. It just sits there, protecting an entire solar system, breaking every law of physics we know. Captain Han finally spoke up. What makes Earth's leaders think we can succeed where 57 other species failed? His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the genuine curiosity in his question. The Admiral smiled. Because we're the only ones who still remember what it's like to be the underdogs. He pressed another button, and the screen showed Earth's early space missions. Every other species out there has had advanced technology for thousands of years. They'd forgotten what it's like to solve problems with basic tools and simple ideas. The room fell silent as images of humanity's first steps into space played across the screen. The Admiral continued. The Korean Space Force has been chosen for this mission because our scientists have a unique way of thinking. We don't just rely on the newest technology. We understand the old ways too. Captain Han felt pride swell in his chest. His crew was young, but they were the best Korea had to offer. Each one had been chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to think differently. Your mission begins tomorrow, Admiral Kim announced. The KSS Sejong will travel to the barrier. You have 6 months to study it, to try what no other species has tried. He looked at each officer in turn. The Galactic Council thinks this is a waste of time. They think humans are too new to space travel to solve this puzzle. His smile grew wider. Let's prove them wrong. As the briefing ended, Captain Han stayed behind, staring at the image of the barrier. Something about its perfect, unbroken surface bothered him. Nothing in nature was that perfect. Nothing was truly impenetrable. There had to be a way through, and his crew would find it. The KSS Sejong hung in space like a silver needle against the black fabric of space. Through the main viewport, Dr. Yun watched the barrier shimmer. Its blue light painted strange patterns across her face as she studied the readings on her screen. "Captain, you need to see this," she called out, her voice filled with excitement. Captain Han floated over to her station, grabbing a handhold to steady himself. The ship's artificial gravity was turned off to save power for their instruments. "What have you found?" he asked, leaning close to look at her screen. Dr. Yun pointed to a wave pattern that pulsed across her display. "The barrier's energy signature. It reminds me of something I've seen before." She pulled up another image. "Look at this. It's a reading from Earth's Van Allen radiation belt, taken in 1958. Captain Hand's eyes widened. The two patterns were almost identical. But that's impossible, he said. The Van Allen belts are natural. This barrier was built by an advanced civilization. Lieutenant Sun drifted over to join them. Maybe that's why no one else has figured it out, she said. They're all looking for complex technology. Nobody thought to check if it was based on something natural. The captain pressed the ship-wide communication button. All science teams, report to the main lab immediately. Within minutes, 20 of Earth's brightest minds were floating in the lab, watching Dr. Yun's presentation. The tear didn't create something new, Dr. Yun explained. They copied Earth's natural radiation shield and made it stronger. That's why it never runs out of power. It feeds off the star's energy, just like our Van Allen belts. One of the younger scientists raised his hand. But how does this help us get through? Dr. Yun smiled. In the 1950s, Earth scientists discovered they could communicate through the Van Allen belts using simple radio waves. Not the fancy quantum communications everyone uses now, but basic AM radio signals. Captain Han felt his heart beat faster. Are you saying we should try to talk to them using technology that's over 400 years old? Exactly, Dr. Yun replied. Every species that's tried to get through has used modern weapons or advanced energy beams. But what if the solution isn't about power? What if it's about understanding the basics? The crew spent the next 3 days setting up old-style radio equipment. Many of the parts had to be created in the ship's 3D printers because nobody made such simple devices anymore. The alien ships watching them must have thought they were crazy. Finally, everything was ready. Lieutenant Sun sat at her station, her fingers hovering over the controls of their makeshift radio. "What should we say?" she asked. Captain Han thought for a moment. "Send out an old Earth radio test signal, the same kind they used when they first discovered the Van Allen belts." The signal went out. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the barrier in front of their ship began to ripple. A small patch, no bigger than a dinner plate, became slightly darker than the rest. "The barrier's frequency is changing," Dr. Yun shouted, pointing at her readings. "The radio waves are affecting it." Before anyone could celebrate their discovery, a voice came through their speakers. It spoke in perfect Korean, surprising everyone on the bridge. After 300 years, the voice said, "Someone finally understands. Welcome, humans. We have been waiting for a species wise enough to look to the past for answers." Captain Han floated in silence, staring at the speaker. They had done what 57 other species could not. Not with powerful weapons or advanced technology, but with simple radio waves that any first-year physics student could understand. The first contact with the Terra civilization had begun, and it started with the most basic form of communication humans had ever used in space. The next few days on the KSS Sejong were filled with non-stop work. Lieutenant Sun hardly left her communication station, testing different radio frequencies. She kept detailed notes of how each signal affected the barrier. "Look at this, Captain," she said one morning, pointing to her screen. "The barrier reacts differently to AM radio waves than to FM waves." She played a recording that showed the barrier's surface rippling like water when hit with certain frequencies. Captain Han leaned closer. "Can you explain it in simple terms?" Lieutenant Sun nodded. "It's like throwing rocks into a pond. Some rocks make big waves, others make small ones. Some radio waves make the barrier react strongly, while others do nothing at all." Dr. Yun rushed onto the bridge, holding a tablet. "Captain, Lieutenant, I found something amazing." She was so excited she almost bumped into a wall. "The frequencies that work best are the same ones Earth used for emergency broadcasts in the 1960s. Captain Han looked confused. "But why would that matter?" "Because," Dr. Yun explained, catching her breath, "those frequencies were chosen to pass through Earth's natural barriers, like the ionosphere and the Van Allen belts. And this barrier works just like those natural shields. The captain pressed a button on his chair, calling all senior officers to the bridge. Within minutes, they were all floating there, watching Dr. Yun's presentation. "Look here," she said, pointing to a diagram. "Modern ships use energy weapons and quantum signals. These bounce off the barrier because they're too complex. But simple radio waves, they slip right through the tiny gaps in the barrier's energy field." Lieutenant Sun jumped in. "It's like trying to get through a fence. You can't break the fence down, but if you find the right-sized hole, you can slip something small through it." The crew worked for hours, adjusting their radio equipment. They tried different combinations of frequencies, carefully watching how the barrier responded. Some of the alien ships nearby had noticed their activity and moved closer to watch. "There!" Lieutenant Sun suddenly shouted. "That frequency! The barrier! It's opening." Everyone turned to look at the main screen. Where their radio waves hit the barrier, a small hole had formed. It wasn't big enough for a ship, but it was the first real breach anyone had ever made in the Terra's defenses. The hole stayed open for exactly 10 seconds before closing, but that was enough. They had proven it could be done. "Send a message through the next hole," Captain Han ordered. "Let's show the Terra we understand their technology." Lieutenant Sun prepared a simple message in Korean. "We come in peace and with respect for your barriers." When the next hole opened, she sent the message. For a few minutes, there was only silence. Then suddenly, the barrier in front of their ship began to change color. The usual blue shifted to a gentle green, and a much larger opening appeared. A new voice came through their speakers, different from the first one they had heard. "Your species is the first to understand that the strongest walls can have the simplest weaknesses. Please, come forward. We have much to discuss." Captain Han looked at his crew with pride. Their success hadn't come from having the most powerful weapons or the newest technology. It had come from understanding basic principles that other species had forgotten long ago. He opened a channel to Earth. "Admiral Kim, this is Captain Han. We've done it. We've found a way through the barrier, and the Terror want to talk." He paused, smiling. "And sir, you were right. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The bridge erupted in cheers as the KSS Sejong slowly moved forward, becoming the first ship in 300 years to pass through the Terror barrier. They had accomplished what 57 other species couldn't, not with force, but with wisdom from humanity's past. As the KSS Sejong passed through the barrier, everyone on the bridge held their breath. The ship's sensors recorded everything, taking in their first clear view of the Terra solar system. What they saw amazed them. Huge space stations orbited a golden sun. Each station gleamed like a jewel, connected by streams of energy that looked like rivers of light. Ships of strange designs moved between the stations, their hulls shimmering with the same blue energy as the barrier. "Captain," Lieutenant Sun called out, "we're receiving a transmission." It's in perfect Korean." A face appeared on the main screen. The alien looked almost human, except for their silver-tinted skin and large, dark eyes. She smiled warmly at the crew. "I am Mary," she said, her Korean so perfect it surprised everyone. "We have been watching your species for a long time. My name is chosen from your language as a sign of respect." Captain Han stepped forward. "You speak our language very well," he said, trying to hide his surprise. Neri's smile grew wider. "We have studied all Earth languages. Your Korean space program especially interested us. You achieved so much with such simple technology." She paused. "That's why we waited for you to find us." Dr. Eun couldn't contain her curiosity. "You wanted us specifically. Why?" "Look at your own success," Neri replied. 57 species tried to break our barrier with their advanced weapons and failed. But you? She gestured at their old radio equipment. You succeeded with technology that most species would call primitive. The bridge crew looked at each other with pride. Their primitive solution had accomplished what countless advanced civilizations couldn't. "We would like to invite your captain and 2 officers to visit our main station," Neri continued. There is much we need to discuss. Captain Han chose Dr. Yun and Lieutenant Sun to go with him. The Terror sent a small ship to pick them up. As they approached the space station, they saw it was much larger than it had looked from far away. It was the size of a small moon. Inside the station, they met more Terror. Each one had chosen a Korean name, showing how much they had studied Earth's culture. The halls were filled with screens showing Earth broadcasts, some from hundreds of years ago. "We have watched your planet grow," Neri explained as she led them through the station. "We saw how you solved problems with creativity instead of just using power. That's what we were looking for." They entered a large room filled with holographic displays. Each one showed a different alien ship trying to break through the barrier. The attacks looked impressive, but did nothing. "These species forgot something important," Neri said, pointing to the displays. "They forgot that newer doesn't always mean better. They forgot their own histories." She turned to face the humans. "But you remembered. You still teach your children about radio waves and simple physics. You keep your old knowledge while learning new things." Captain Han understood now. "That's why you waited for us. You wanted a species that hadn't forgotten its past." "Yes," Neri said. "We need allies who understand that power isn't everything. The galaxy is changing. There are dangers coming that can't be fought with advanced weapons." She touched a control, and a new hologram appeared. "We have technology far beyond yours, but we need your way of thinking. Your ability to find simple solutions to complex problems." The humans looked at each other, realizing this was more than just first contact. The Terror hadn't been hiding from the galaxy. They had been waiting for the right allies. And humanity, with its mix of old and new knowledge, had proven itself worthy. "Now," Mary said, "shall we begin our real discussion? There is much your species can teach us, just as we have much to teach you." The Terror's main meeting room was huge, with windows that showed the golden sun and space stations outside. Captain Han, Dr. Yun, and Lieutenant Sun sat at a round table with Neri and the Terror's chief scientist, Yuri. "It's time we told you why we built the barrier," Yuri said, touching a control on the table. A hologram appeared, showing the beautiful planet with 3 moons. "This was our first home." The image changed, showing the planet being hit by strange energy beams. The surface turned dark, and the oceans began to boil. Dr. Yun covered her mouth in shock as they watched the planet die. "It happened 500 years ago," Neri explained. "Another species attacked us with weapons we had never seen before. They used energy beams that went through all our shields. We lost everything." Captain Han leaned forward. "But you survived." "Yes," Yuri said. "A small group of us escaped. We found this solar system and built the barrier using what we learned from studying Earth's natural shields. We made it strong enough to stop any weapon." Lieutenant Sun nodded slowly. "But then it became your prison." "Exactly," Neri said. "We were safe, but we were alone. We couldn't trust anyone. Then we discovered Earth's old radio broadcasts floating through space. We saw how humans solved problems, how you kept learning but didn't throw away your old knowledge." Yuri pressed another button, and new holograms appeared. They showed Earth's history, from the first radio towers to modern spaceships. "Your species remembers its past. You still use simple tools even though you have advanced ones. That's rare in the galaxy." Dr. Yun was writing everything down on her tablet. "But why didn't you contact us sooner?" "We had to be sure," Neri said. "We watched how you handled first contact with other species, how you solved problems without fighting, how you shared your knowledge freely." She smiled. "You were worth waiting for." Captain Han thought about this. "The species that destroyed your world, are they still out there?" The room grew quiet. Yuri nodded slowly. "Yes, they'd grown stronger. That's why we need allies who think differently. The galaxy's most advanced weapons couldn't stop them before. We need new ideas, or maybe very old ones." Dr. Yun suddenly sat up straight. That's why our radio waves worked on your barrier. You built it to stop advanced weapons, but you made sure it would let through simple signals, just in case you found allies worth trusting." "Very clever," Yuri said, looking pleased. "The barrier keeps out anything too complex or powerful, but simple radio waves, those could pass through tiny gaps. We knew that any species smart enough to try old technology would be wise enough to be our friends." Neri stood up and walked to the window. "We have amazing technology we can share with Earth. But more importantly, we need to learn from you. Your way of thinking, your ability to use both old and new tools, that's what the galaxy needs." Captain Han joined her at the window. "And what about the barrier?" he asked. "We'll modify it," she said. "Make it selective. Let friends pass through while keeping dangers out. Your Earth scientists can help us. Together, we can make something better than either of us could make alone." As they talked, more Terror came into the room, each carrying different Earth objects: old radios, books, simple machines. They had been collecting and studying these things for centuries, learning about human creativity and problem-solving. "Captain Han," Neri said formally, "will Earth join us? Will you help us protect the galaxy in ways that no one else has thought of?" The captain looked at his crew, saw their excited faces, and knew there was only one answer. Humanity had found not just new allies, but friends who truly understood the value of remembering where you came from while moving forward. Over the next few weeks, the KSS Sejong became a center of activity. More human ships arrived, bringing Earth's best scientists. They worked side by side with the Terror, studying the barrier and sharing ideas. Dr. Yun spent most of her time with Yuri in the Terror's main laboratory. The room was filled with both human and Terror equipment. Old Earth radio sets sat next to advanced alien computers. They were trying to combine both technologies to make something new. "Look at this," Dr. Yun said one morning, pointing to her screen. "If we use Earth's old radiation shield designs, but power them with your energy systems." Yuri moved closer to see. His silver skin glowed under the lab lights. "Yes, we could make a barrier that lets friendly ships through but stops dangerous ones." Captain Han watched their work from the observation deck. Lieutenant Sun stood beside him, helping to test the new systems they were creating. On the main screen, they could see the barrier changing color as they tried different combinations. "It's amazing," Lieutenant Sun said. "Their advanced technology and our simple solutions, they work perfectly together." The captain nodded. Sometimes the best answers come from looking both forward and backward. Below them, in the huge space dock, human engineers were helping the Terror modify their ships. They were adding simple backup systems that would work even if the advanced ones failed. The Terror were surprised to learn that human ships still carried basic radio equipment and backup controls that didn't need computers. "Your people think of everything," Neri said, joining Captain Han on the deck. "Most species only trust new technology. But you understand that old technology can save lives when new systems fail." Suddenly, alarms started ringing. Everyone rushed to their stations. A huge ship had appeared at the edge of the solar system. It was one of the advanced alien races that had tried to break through the barrier before. "They're demanding to know how we got in," Lieutenant Sun reported, listening to their message. Captain Han smiled. "Show them." Dr. Yun and Yuri activated their new system. The barrier changed from blue to green in front of the alien ship. A simple radio message went out, explaining how to safely pass through. The alien ship's crew seemed confused. They had brought their most powerful weapons, expecting a fight. Instead, they were being invited to simply talk. "They're responding," Lieutenant Sun said. They want to know if we can teach them about the old Earth technologies we used." Everyone laughed. The mighty alien ship, with all its advanced weapons, was asking to learn about simple radio waves and basic physics. "Tell them yes," Neri said. "The more species that remember these lessons, the better." Over the next few days, more ships came. Word had spread through the galaxy that humans had solved the mystery of the Terror barrier. But instead of being jealous or angry, most species were curious. They wanted to learn. "We're creating something new here," Captain Han said to his crew during their evening meeting. "Not just new technology, but a new way of thinking. The galaxy is learning that progress doesn't mean forgetting the past." Dr. Yun showed them the final designs for the new barrier system. It used both Terra and human ideas. The advanced alien energy shields were controlled by simple Earth-style systems. It was stronger than the old barrier but friendly and welcoming to those who came in peace. "The Terra were right to wait for us," Lieutenant Sun said proudly. Humans never forgot that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. As they talked, the new barrier glowed softly around them, protecting but not isolating. It was a perfect mix of human wisdom and Terra technology, proving that the best future comes from remembering the lessons of the past. 1 year had passed since the KSS Sejong first broke through the Terra barrier. The scene around their solar system had changed completely. Where once there was only an impenetrable wall, now there was a welcoming gateway for friendly ships from across the galaxy. Captain Han stood in the new Human Terra Space Academy, watching students from 20 different species learn about both old and new technologies. In one classroom, a Terra teacher showed young aliens how to use simple radio equipment. In another, human instructors taught the basics of nuclear physics using everyday examples. "It's hard to believe how much has changed," Neri said, walking up beside him. She had become Earth's main ambassador to the Terra people. "A year ago, we were hiding behind our barrier. Now we're teaching the galaxy a new way of thinking." Dr. Yun rushed up to them, holding her tablet. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Captain, Ambassador Neri, you need to see this." She showed them some test results. The new barrier system worked perfectly in all 300 tests. Not a single hostile ship got through, but every friendly vessel passed safely. The new barrier was their greatest achievement. It combined Earth's simple radiation shields with Terra energy technology. They called it the Smart Shield because it could tell the difference between friends and enemies by checking for simple radio signals that all friendly ships now carried. "Admiral Kim is here," Lieutenant Sun announced, hurrying down the hallway. "He's bringing representatives from the Galactic Council." They all went to the main meeting hall. Admiral Kim stood proudly with a group of alien leaders. Many of them had once laughed at the idea of humans solving the barrier problem. Now they came to learn from Earth and the Terra. "The Council has made a decision," the lead representative announced. "We want to build smart shields around other vulnerable worlds. Will Earth and the Terra help us?" Captain Han looked at Neri. She smiled and nodded. "Of course we'll help," he said. "But you must promise to teach others what we've learned. That new isn't always better, and that old knowledge is worth keeping." The aliens agreed eagerly. They had seen how human ideas mixed with Terra technology created something better than either one alone. Later that day, Captain Han visited the ship dock. The KSS Sejong was there, being upgraded with Terra technology. But they kept all the old backup systems, including the simple radio that had first broken through the barrier. "Some of the alien ships want to remove their advanced weapons," Lieutenant Sun reported, checking her datapad. "They say the simple defense systems work better." Dr. Yun laughed. "Who would have thought? The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy are learning that sometimes less is more." The biggest change was in the Terra themselves. They no longer hid from the galaxy. Their silver-skinned people now traveled freely, sharing their knowledge, but always remembering the human lesson about keeping things simple. "We're starting construction on 5 new academies," Neri told them. "Every major sector of the galaxy will have a place to learn both old and new ways." Captain Han looked out at the stars through the station's huge windows. Dozens of ships moved through the barrier, each one carrying the simple radio technology that had started it all. Earth had given the galaxy something more valuable than advanced weapons or powerful shields. They had shown that progress didn't mean forgetting where you came from. "What's next, Captain?" Lieutenant Sun asked. "We keep learning," he replied. from the past, from the future, from each other. He touched the old radio he still carried as a reminder. And we never forget that sometimes the biggest problems have the simplest solutions. As they watched, a new ship approached the barrier. It was from a distant galaxy, carrying visitors who had heard about the humans who broke through the unbreakable shield. The barrier glowed green, welcoming them to a galaxy that had learned to value both wisdom and progress, thanks to the simple ideas of Earth and the advanced dreams of the Terra.